Wanted to take a look at XLK stock. XLK is the iShares Technology ETF. When you break down what's in this ETF, when you compare it to the broader market, it's on a tear. But is XLK stock a good buy right now? Let's break a few things down and I'll show you what I'm looking at, especially when you consider what might happen with the broader stock market and the economy moving in the days ahead. Let's jump in. If you are just joining me for the first time, thanks so much. What I do here is I break down the economy and show how it applies and moves the stock market. I am D.H. Taylor. I want to say thanks for all the great comments. I just launched this channel a couple months ago. This is a breakaway channel from my first channel, which is all about cannabis stocks. We are looking at XLK stock. This is the Technology Sector ETF. Technology is on fire. It always will be, basically because it outperforms the broader market. With the broader market, you're going to get financials like banks, which don't really produce as much revenue and income versus, say, Microsoft, Apple, the big players. As you can see, we had a bit of a slowdown through October because bond yields were moving much higher really rapidly. Stock market sold off. Bond yields turned right back around. So did XLK technology stock because yields were a little lower. Moving forward, here is a look at XLK stock versus SPY stock. SPY stock is the ETF versus the S&P 500. Of course, XLK being technology. And as you can see, clearly from over the past couple of years, XLK has significantly outperformed the S&P 500. Again, you break things down. You get a financial company like a bank, perfect example. Their return on investment is much lower than technology. Then the technology sector, of course, has outperformed a lot of sectors, all sectors, for years now. I wanted to kind of look at what is really driving XLK stock. AAPL stock, Apple, MSFT stock, Microsoft. Just put up an analysis on Microsoft up on my channel. Make sure to check that one out. They're both overvalued, and they're both selling off sharply just this morning because bond yields have turned upward. We're still in a lot of unknown territory when it comes to what is going to happen with bond yields. We will continue to get more and more information, and this is what I really kind of break down on my channel. What's going to happen with the economy? Right now, our main focus is interest rates. The Federal Reserve pushed interest rates up much sharply, and this is really affecting everything across the board. But one of the things you really need to kind of look at is right now the United States Treasury bond is trading, the yield is about 4.29%. Call it 4.3 for ease. Yield. So if you give the United States federal government $1,000, you're going to get 4.3% back, which is $43. Should you, and that's locked in. Federal government assumedly won't go bankrupt anytime soon, although they are pushing some speed limits there. It is kind of interesting to see how the budget always plays out. Microsoft and Apple, what are their yields as a comparison? First off, when we look at MSFT stock, 365.50 is the current price, 11.21 is the earnings per share. You're getting about 3%. Now, mind you, the 10-year yield was about 4.3%. So your risk on the United States federal government is if they actually go bankrupt, we probably have much bigger problems. You probably don't care much about your portfolio anymore. I don't think we're going to go bankrupt anytime soon, but sure, politics, things are going to get interesting. That's what makes it so much fun. You're going to get about 1.25% more yield out of an investment out of the United States federal government. The 10-year Treasury yield is the benchmark. You start there, you look at it, and you ask the question, what's it yielding? Cool. I want to find stocks that outperforms that. You may have a strategy where you're looking for companies that underperform that. I can't think of any myself, but some individuals would because it fits their taste buds a certain way, or the volatility is really low. There are reasons why some individuals would do that. But when you look at MSFT stock and you only get 3%, you have to ask yourself the question first, how much risk is involved? Well, the economy, the United States Federal Reserve is trying to actively contract the economy, if but a small amount. This would mean lower incomes for Americans. Then it would mean lower expenditures because incomes are dropping, which would mean lower revenues for companies like Apple and Microsoft. So your downside risk on that is kind of high. Apple, AAPL stock trading about 189, 656, 3.46%, a little better yield comparatively. But the thing is with XLK, that last column, now this is kind of a moving target. I've noticed I keep going back to the numbers and I keep looking, I'm like, oh, what was the number again? And I noticed that these allocation numbers change every single day because money comes in and out on a regular basis, and they're constantly trying to move their asset allocation, doing minor tweaks. Minor. We're talking about 0.25% maybe. Nonetheless, this is nearly 50% of XLK, the technology sector ETF. Just two stocks. Microsoft is selling off today, so is Apple. So these two stocks are really going to push XLK. They didn't kind of spread it out, and I'm not really super in love with allocations from these kinds of ETFs where it's so in the pockets of just one or two companies. If you're going to do a technology sector, do a technology sector instead of, well, we'll do these two stocks because that's what we do, then we'll pick a few others. Now, you'd have to break everything out. You'd need a spreadsheet. You'd need a lot of time to ask the question, if they were to drop allocation for Apple and Microsoft and spread things out, what would that amount to? But keep in mind, Microsoft and especially Apple are such huge companies. So they represent a big chunk of the technology sector. So it's kind of a balance as to what you might want to kind of consider. Nonetheless, XLK has performed well, but Microsoft and Apple have outperformed XLK, which kind of makes you wonder, why bother with XLK? Why not just get into Apple and Microsoft? Mind you, it is a technology sector with two heavyweights, which tells you the rest of the sector actually is underperforming Microsoft and Apple. For me, technology will always be an outperformer for the broader stock market. They simply make more money. What they bring in, that $1 they bring in, they're going to get 40, 50, 60% in revenue, net earnings, which is far higher than, say, the S&P 500. The S&P 500, 500 different stocks, brings in about 8.25%. Microsoft, 40%. So dollar for dollar, Microsoft is a much better bet than the broader stock market. But as it turns out, Microsoft and Apple are a better investment than XLK stock. But the downside is a lot less than owning outright Microsoft and Apple, MSFT stock and AAPL stock right now. The downside risk for stocks is actually kind of high considering what could happen with the Federal Reserve in the next 2 weeks alone. But we will continue to get more and more information for employment numbers, which is really the hot topic. This will show us the damage or how much more work the Federal Reserve needs to do. There's a meeting next week. We mostly think that things are going to stay pat for some time. But what if the Federal Reserve has to push interest rates higher? Microsoft stock, MSFT stock, and AAPL stock for Apple, they both will come down because the Federal Reserve is going to have to contract the economy even further. Especially Apple, direct-to-consumer kind of company that it is, that would really impact their revenue growth rates, which would impact, of course, their yield. Make sure to hit that like and follow button if you're looking for this kind of content where I'll break down these individual stocks, the ETF sectors, and of course the broader stock market with the broader economy so you can stay ahead of the curve. Thanks so much for all the likes and comments and the follows. The channel is growing actually quite rapidly because this is my breakout channel from my original channel and it's doing well. Thanks so much. See you in the next video.